She stood at the edge of the platform long after everyone else had left. The train had already come and gone, roaring in like it owned the world, then disappearing just as quickly, taking with it the last thin thread of hope she had been holding on to all morning. The wind carried the smell of iron tracks and dust, curling around her like a reminder that she didn't belong anywhere near this place anymore. Her hands trembled around the handle of a small, worn suitcase. One wheel was cracked. The other dragged slightly when she shifted her weight. It wasn't much of a life packed inside it, just a few clothes, a folded letter she had read too many times to still believe in, and a photograph she kept face down so she wouldn't have to look at what she had lost. Her name was Lila Carter, and she had traveled 2 days, across 3 states because someone had promised her a future. He had said he would be here. He wasn't. At first she told herself there must be a reason. Traffic, a delay, a misunderstanding. But as the minutes turned into an hour, and the hour turned into the hollow silence of abandonment, the truth settled into her bones like cold rain. No one was coming. Around her, life continued as if she didn't exist. People reunited in laughter, kissed on platforms, lifted children into their arms. Suitcases were grabbed, taxis called, lives resumed, and Lila stood still in the middle of it all. Invisible in the only way that truly hurt. Seen, but not chosen. By the time the station emptied, her hope had thinned into something fragile and useless. She sat down on a wooden bench, not because she wanted to, but because her legs no longer felt like they belonged to her. The sky had begun to bruise with evening colors, deep blues bleeding into gray. Somewhere in the distance, thunder muttered like an old warning. That's when she heard the boots. Slow, measured, unhurried. Not the hurried steps of city people rushing past, but the grounded rhythm of someone who had never learned to fear silence. She didn't look up at first. She didn't want to see another stranger pass her by, like she was just part of the scenery. But the boots stopped in front of her and stayed. "Miss?" The voice was rough, low, edged with something like caution but not unkindness. Lila finally lifted her head. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered hat that looked like it had survived more storms than most people ever would. His shirt was dusty, sleeves rolled up, hands marked by work instead of softness. A cowboy, she thought vaguely, though it felt strange to see one standing on a city platform like he belonged there. His eyes weren't what she expected. They weren't judgmental. They weren't curious in that invasive way strangers often looked at her when she was falling apart. They were steady, like he had seen broken things before and didn't feel the need to run from them. "You all right?" he asked. A simple question. Too simple for what she was feeling. Lila almost laughed, but it came out as something broken instead. "Do I look all right?" He didn't answer right away. He just sat down beside her on the bench, leaving a careful space between them, close enough that she wasn't alone, far enough that she didn't feel trapped. "That yours?" he asked, nodding toward her suitcase. She nodded. "Where you headed?" "That was the plan," she said softly. "Now I'm not sure I'm headed anywhere." The cowboy leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. For a moment, he just watched the empty tracks. Then he said something that made her breath catch. "Waiting for someone who didn't show?" Her throat tightened. She hated how easily he read it. Hated how obvious her heartbreak must have been. "Yes." He nodded like he understood more than she was saying. "That happens more than folks admit." Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with things neither of them rushed to fill. The sky deepened. The station lights flickered on, buzzing faintly like tired insects. Somewhere behind them, a cleaning cart rattled across concrete. Then the cowboy spoke again. "Why didn't you go back home?" The question hit harder than she expected. "Because there was no home left." Not really. Only the idea of one she had been trying to build out of someone else's promises. "I don't have one," she said quietly. That was the first time his expression changed. Not pity, something sharper. Recognition. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, old, creased at the edges. Not a phone. Not a map. Something written by hand. "I used to think home was a place," he said. "Turns out it's a choice." Lila glanced at him. "What does that mean?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "It means I've seen folks wait for doors that never open again. And I've seen what happens when they stop waiting." Her eyes stung, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not in front of a stranger. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she admitted. The cowboy stood slowly, as if deciding something important. Then he did something she didn't expect. He picked up her suitcase. Lila startled. "What are you doing?" "I'm walking you out of here," he said simply. "That's it?" "That's it." She hesitated. "You don't even know me." He gave the faintest hint of a smile. "That's usually how it starts." He didn't pull her. Didn't rush her. Just stood there holding the suitcase like it weighed nothing at all, waiting. After a long moment, she stood too. They walked out of the station together. The city was louder outside, cars hissing past. Distant sirens, neon signs flickering like restless thoughts. Lila expected him to stop at a taxi stand or point her toward a motel. Instead, he walked beside her like he had nowhere else to be. "You said I was waiting for someone who didn't show," she said after a while. He nodded. "Why did you stay?" That question made him pause. He adjusted his hat slightly before answering. "Because I know what it feels like when nobody comes," he said. "And I decided a long time ago I wouldn't be part of that story for someone else." They walked in silence again, but it was different now. Less empty, more like something fragile beginning to form. Eventually, they reached a small diner at the corner of a quiet street. Warm light spilled through the windows, painting the sidewalk gold. The cowboy stopped. "Ever been hungry and too tired to eat?" he asked. She gave a weak nod. "Then you don't skip meals," he said. "Not tonight." Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and fresh bread. A bell chimed when they entered. The waitress greeted him like he was a regular, not a stranger carrying someone else's broken evening. They sat in a booth by the window. For the first time all day, Lila wasn't standing alone. She didn't realize how hungry she was until the food arrived. She ate slowly at first, then more steadily, like her body was remembering what survival felt like. The cowboy didn't rush her, didn't ask more questions, just stayed. At some point, she asked quietly, "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because somebody should have done it for me once," he said. "But nobody did." That answer settled deep inside her, heavier than sadness. Something like understanding. Something like grief for people they had both once been. When they finally left the diner, the night had softened. The world felt less sharp around the edges. Lila stopped outside the door. "I still don't know where I'm going," she admitted. The cowboy nodded. "That's all right," he said. "You don't have to know tonight." He reached into his pocket and placed something in her hand, a small folded note. Inside was an address, a ranch outside the city, simple handwriting. "If you need a place until you figure things out," he said, "there's work. And a roof. Nothing fancy, just steady." Lila stared at it. "Why me?" He paused, then answered honestly, "Because you're still here." Something broke open inside her then, not pain, but the beginning of release. The cowboy stepped back slightly, tipping his hat. "You don't have to decide now," he added. "Just don't let one man not showing up convince you nobody ever will." Then he turned and walked away into the night. And for a long time, Lila stood there holding the note, realizing something she had almost forgotten in the weight of disappointment. Sometimes kindness doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it doesn't ask for anything back. And sometimes when no one comes for you, it's because life is saving the moment for someone who will